talk about it, y'all. Talk about what's going on in the world today. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. 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 Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. 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 Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it. Let's talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it. Let's talk about it. Talk about it. Let's talk about it. Talk about it. Let's talk about it, y'all. Welcome to our show today. Let's talk about it. Now, what we're talking about today is Michael Brown and what's going on out in Ferguson, St. Louis, Missouri. How a young man at the age of 18 gets shot by the police being unarmed with his hands in the air. Now, this is what had happened.
But was not related to the curfew. The person is hospitalized in critical condition this morning. They say they are searching for the shooter. More details now on the officer who shot and killed Michael Brown. The Ferguson Police Department identified him as Darren Wilson. Wilson is a 6-year police veteran. He had no previous complaints against him. The department says Wilson is on paid administrative leave since the shooting, but they will not release anything about the officer's whereabouts. Georgia's NAACP leaders say they are just outraged by the response to the police shooting in Missouri. They want to be proactive about preventing that kind of violence here.
We want to stop another incident like that happened in Ferguson. Ferguson could be any city.
The
police officer. This is a test. The eyes of the world are watching.
Then, Congressman Lacy Clay and former New York City Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik on when and why Officer Friendly became G.I. Joe. And is Ferguson another page in race relations or history repeating itself?
It's time to stop saying it's an old wound and close it for good.
A conversation with journalist L.Z. Granderson.
We back like we never left. On the topic of Michael Brown out in Ferguson, St. Louis, Missouri. As we took a look at that footage, we'd like to talk a little bit more about what they was talking about. And it's crazy, man. Did you guys see that footage on how the police was using military armed weapon forces against American United States civilians? I mean, they just protesting on the situation. Now, as we look further on to the video, we'll see more details on what's going on. Let's take a look.
Equipment. Attitudinally, there is a difference between a soldier who goes off to war to kill people and a policeman who is there to protect. Is this a question of equipment or is this a question of attitude?
That's right. Let's talk about it.
Well, it's an issue that we need to have a national discussion about. The militarization of local police forces and then when they are used to quell peaceful demonstration, then we have a problem. And especially around this entire case of the murder of Michael Brown at the hands of a Ferguson police officer.
And Mr. Kelly,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. I was just going to for having this equipment. I'm assuming that lots of times police are outgunned and need heavier equipment.
Well, this goes back to the early 90s and the drug war, late 80s, early 90s and the drug war. Drug dealers had far better equipment, more dangerous equipment than the police. Then you go into a post 9/11 world and the terror threats that we face. Also keep in mind, we've seen a substantial increase in the active shooter scenarios in our schools, grammar schools, theaters, where police have to respond in a capacity that they have the equipment and the resources necessary to fight that threat. It's absolutely needed.
So, Congressman, how do you strike that balance? You don't want your police force looking like they are seeing their citizenry as enemies. On the other...
Yeah. So we back on Let's Talk About It. Yeah. In the process of looking at the footage and everything, I had to catch me a lizard, you know. So yeah, that's the type of things that go on. You know what I mean? Let's talk about it. We talk about everything. We catch a lot of things. And we catch footage on everything. But what we just experienced with the talk from the police officer from New York was he was talking about them having that type of weapons because of back in the late 90s, the drug dealers had bigger and better guns than they did. You know, and I don't think, you know, and then he tried to say because of the World Trade Center, the 9/11 situation. But, you know, that wasn't a really good excuse or reason of having those guns out in Ferguson, you know, and out on the civilians. So now let's talk more about it. Let's look at more of the footage. Let's get into it.
Much equipment used in Ferguson came from the Pentagon. We do know that police forces around the country received military upgrades for anti-narcotics operations in the 90s and more recently to combat terrorism. I am joined now by former NYPD Chief Bernard Kerik and Congressman Lacy Clay. Today, Missouri Governor Jay Nixon on the state of Ferguson streets and the investigation into the shooting death of a black teen by a white police officer.
This is a test. The eyes of the world are watching.
Then, Congressman Lacy Clay and former New York City Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik on when and why Officer Friendly became G.I. Joe. And is Ferguson another page in race relations or history repeating itself?
It's time to stop saying it's an old wound and close it for good.
A conversation with journalist LZ.
Let's talk about it. You know, yeah, I got my little friend along with me, you know. See, he's just a little friendly, you know. My wife don't like him though. But today's show, as we move along, we're gonna talk more about what's going on with Michael Brown, the 18-year-old that got shot, unarmed, and we're gonna talk about what's going on in Ferguson with the protesters. And is this a racial thing, or is it? Let's take a look.
Defied a newly imposed midnight to 5 a.m. curfew. 7 people were arrested. 1 person was shot, apparently by another demonstrator. That person is in critical condition. Police used smoke canisters and tear gas in response to the shooting. Moments ago, I spoke with Missouri Governor Jay Nixon. Governor Nixon, thanks so much for being here this morning. The man you put in charge of security, Captain Johnson, said after last night that he was disappointed in what happened. There was some violence, some arrests. Did you have any concern when you considered the curfew? Do you have any concern now that it could be counterproductive?
And appropriate. And as we moved through the week, when we saw the militarization of police response, I thought the best thing to do was bring the highway patrol in late in the week, bring in Captain Johnson, and get involved with a less hard look. That went well for until the second night, and then we had some agitation. Last night's curfew, I think everybody worked well. We're always disappointed when things aren't perfect, but thousands of people spoke last night, thousands of people marched, and not a single gunshot fired by a member of law enforcement last night, and the members of the community tremendously helpful last night.
How long do you intend to enforce the curfew? What's the benchmark for lifting it?
Well, first of all, we wanted to make sure when we saw that second night late, the clear actions of a few to loot, we knew we had to keep people's property safe and peace in order to get justice here. We can't be distracted from the longer pitch here, and the longer is to make sure that these dual investigations, the Justice Department and the local prosecutor, get to justice, that they are thorough and done. And I thought that this distraction and folks not feeling safe in their own homes while protecting the rights of people to protest was important. But we're hoping to, we'll meet later this morning with the team last night, see how things from their perspective. But we are trying to use the least amount of force to provide people to the ability to speak while also protecting the property of the people of Ferguson.
So do you see the curfew staying in place for the next several days? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, it could be. We'd like to see it ratchet down. What we'd like to see, well, that'll be judged by the community. And like I say, I was heartened last night by there are thousands of people there. And as the curfew approached, it was the local folks helping us. Earlier in the evening, Colonel Replogle and Captain Johnson marched with folks and listened and talked to them. Let's not kid ourselves. This was a horrific shooting. We're not to justice yet, and there will be some moments of energy and angst over the coming days and weeks.
Where are we in the judicial process from the local point of view? When do you expect a case would be ready to present to a grand jury?
Well, you have two separate investigations. I was happy. I mean, I talked just the other day to a long talk with General Holder. Based on that, they put 40 FBI agents working in St. Louis yesterday, in this region yesterday, to accelerate that process for that parallel investigation. I think it's a time for the local prosecutor to have the opportunity to step up. I know everybody's working really hard. It's important we get this right. This is a big matter. Clearly, the death of an 18-year-old at the hands of a law enforcement gun.
As we come back to the show, let's talk about it as we come to an end of the show. And just from the stuff that we just heard from the governor of Missouri, it's kind of crazy, man. They need to really put their minds together and figure out how to handle the situation, and get things in order, in just order, So as we come to the end of the show, we'd like to thank you for looking at the show, for taking the time out to look at the show, and as you continue to look on, we got more exciting action that you need to hear, more important news that you need to know. And to Michael Brown, we'd like to say rest in peace, much love, and we out.